Hi, this is Arun Bhaskar from Bhaskar Ki Business Batein. And while we bring you policy analysis and stories many times, this time we're going to go to a conversation, the third in our series, with Manish Shokhani, a legendary investor, the guide for financial markets, and a personal tutor to me. Manish, it's wonderful having you here.
Last time, reminded of the days I would read your edits, learn and benefit from them.
Honored.
So you're being too kind.
Honored, but I still learn from you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Manish, we have talked in the past on subjects like geopolitics, on which are the best investment areas across the world. And this time I would like you to look at India. India is a country that has huge potential, but has fallen short of achieving that potential again and again and again. Yet there's no denying that India is a wonderful place. So how do you look at India?
So there's a line which my friend Ruchir Sharma uses very well.
Okay.
He says, we consistently disappoint the optimists and we consistently disappoint the pessimists.
Oh, wow.
Right?
What a wonderful line. What a wonderful line.
But as you said, see, it's a country which has a lot going for it. In terms of natural resources, in terms of people, the cheerfulness of the average person, their acceptance of that this is what life has laid out for me in terms of destiny. So you don't get too carried away when you're doing very well, and you don't get too despondent when you're not doing so well. So by and large, as a spiritual country and a civilizational power, I think that innate sense of people is there that our time will come. It's also true that currently what we are going through seems to be India's golden era in terms of demographics, in terms of leadership, in terms of the confidence that the country has, in terms of even our image outside India when you travel, also in terms of our geopolitical importance.
Yes.
So all kind of ducks are lined up in a sense for India to do much more than what it's done in the past and actually accelerate. So as an investor, you're always hopeful. There are a lot of good things which have happened, but I think you want to talk more about what could or should happen.
What could or should? I mean, bad things will happen. Right. But now, what is the future? Can India do better than what it has done?
So, look, as a patriotic Indian, you always want, like you say in Pepsi, that slogan, no, ye dil mange more. That can we do better, faster, cheaper in that sort of that vein.
Yes.
When I always sit back, and this goes back to the days when I came back to India, even post my studies, you first look at the financials of any country, like you look at a company and you figure out what are the loopholes and where are the stress factors. And when you look at India, the first thing that strikes you when you look at our external balance sheet, I'll start with that first, then I'll come to domestic. That on the external side, the first thing is forever, we are dependent on energy from outside. And no country can become great without having control over its own energy source. Even if we knew we had to import it from Russia or Middle East or wherever, we've not built that bridges and connectivity sufficiently with those people to, for example, if I know I have to buy goods from this person, I should be thinking very early, what will I sell back to this person? So I don't continuously have a negative trade balance with them. And therefore, I'm beholden to them all the time for whatever they want from me. So we kept buying oil as well as we kept buying defense equipment from Russia, but we never had product which we could sell back.
Which could sell back to Russia.
For example.
Yes.
Even when this recent war, which we've done a great job by getting discounted oil from them, but even in a period when they were cut off from the whole world, we were not able to export to close the gap over there. And they were scrambling to find ways how to utilize
because the money. They had rupee surpluses.
Correct. So let's park that one as a huge failure of the Indian state for decades to not solve energy. And indeed, fortunes have been made by people who've solved energy crisis in different countries, including some in India. But as a country, I think that's our central biggest failure. Then drawing further from there, 2007, we signed a nuclear deal in the previous government of Manmohan Singh.
Yes.
It's 2024. 3 governments have changed. We are still lagging behind on nuclear. We have even our own thorium in Kerala, which the nuclear energy has been talking about for years with our fast breeder reactors. And even on energy front, we are lagging far behind even for that. Because then you could have made that for transportation fuels from oil, and the rest could all have been made from this and so on. Thirdly, this Prime Minister has been a big votary of solar, for example. We are blessed with solar. Solar technology has come in abundance. Who leads the world in solar? It is China. Everything's made in China, from the panels and the modules to everything. So if we don't solve the energy problem for a country which is going from 50 million rich consumers to hopefully 500 million consumers, we're going to be completely trapped. So this becomes one central thing that one hopes is given kind of emergency attention, as if we are in a state of war.
Correct.
We need 60 gigawatts a year. We are producing maybe 20 incrementally, even today, because we went through 10 years of even no power. No drilling has happened in India. I don't know since when. We had the NELP rounds, then Reliance, remember, had talked of KG-D4, KG-D6. Nothing really came out of that. So energy, I can't harp on enough. A strategy to then export back to the basket of products that these countries need is kind of 2. 3, we are currently geopolitically feeling very proud of ourselves, and we are members of the Quad, for example. But if you're a member of Quad, the Quad members ought to be doing swap lines with India. So the memory we have is that we faced a currency crisis, and therefore I should build a hoard of currency chests, $600-700 billion, which is 16% of India's GDP is locked in low yielding foreign exchange assets, because the last time there was a crisis, we had to pledge our gold. We are so haunted by that memory. But you did not need that cash balance. Like if you had a good banker who would extend you an overdraft, those in international treaties are called swap lines. So if I can have a $200 billion swap line with US, who wants to be my partner, if I can have a $100 billion swap line with Japan, who wants to be my partner, I can have a $50 billion swap line with Australia, which wants to be my partner, to help them in the Indian Ocean and the military arena. If and when something bad happens to them, they should also correspondingly help us if and when something bad happens to us. If you free up $600-700 billion from a forex kitty, imagine what it does to the pace of change in our country.
Yes, absolutely.
So that would be kind of, another thing. FTAs, for 30 years, we've been out of, everything, whereas China was embraced by America and brought into WTO, and they've taken over the whole ASEAN bloc, and the trade relations with US, pre-Trump, of course, have been fantastic, and it allowed China to build. We haven't been in part of any global supply chain.
Correct.
So we haven't signed any FTA. I mean, what is signed, of course, it's great. We've managed with UAE and we've managed with Australia.
And before that, we cancelled so many FTAs.
Yeah, but because the terms of trade, we have not managed to negotiate. And it's not to do with one government.
It's
I'm taking a span of 30, 40 years. This is the centrality of what an export strategy has to be. Today, Bangladesh has become the leader of textiles, not India, where we have cotton, we have the machinery, we have the skills.
And the markets.
And the markets. And yet it's Vietnam and Bangladesh which export more than India in textiles. Then, of course, local things which are stopping. Even if, for example, I get an export order, my last mile linkage at the port, no one cares about what damage you are paying. No one cares about how quickly you'll get cleared. No one cares about, how fast you move on the customs. Anyone can stop you there, and how the goods move to the last mile. If you have to be part of global supply chains, this has to move seamlessly in and out. So this last mile linkage, including the, Chief Economic Advisor has spoken about it, where in Tamil Nadu, someone is still sitting inside an SEZ, although there are no benefits anymore, just so that mera sab, my mal can come and go easily. I mean, just simple, basic administrative reform at local ground level is
what is needed, yes.
Then if I turn further away from that if you want exports and you want dollars to come in, this is a country which should have had 100 million tourists.
Very true.
We have less tourists than Singapore as a country. Because we may make a grandiose airport or we may make a fantastic 5-star hotel, but that linkage, when you land anywhere in the world, from your airport, you can roll your bag onto your mass transit train, get out in the city center, roll the bag out.
Hotel.
Even from that train station, from your metro station, you can roll the bag into your cab, and the cab drops you to here all the linkage friction points are so much, you say, who wants to deal with this? So on all fronts, whether it's movement of goods or of people or of money, we have friction points. And no one is paying enough attention to getting rid of, you're missing the big picture in terms of FTAs, currency blocks, swap lines. There's no strategy that I need to pinpoint which products I want to create for which country to close the trade balance. And then finally, the last mile linkage. So on external front, there's so much to be done that I just wish they had put, people from the private sector to just sit there, like we do in management parlance. You set a goal, you make a plan, you execute to the plan, and then you review it. Here we have announcements, but like a former
But none of the
minister
delivery
used to
takes
say,
place. Yes.
outlays are not equal to outcomes.
Yes.
And that seems to be something that we miss really dearly. So at export front, external balance sheet with 2% deficit every year, despite so much of remittances coming into India from our workers abroad.
They're the lifeline. They actually were saving us.
And we have 5-6 years before AI disrupts our IT and our global capability centers.
And employment.
Which is a service
Yes.
sector which came to the rescue of the manufacturing sector in India, because they didn't have to deal with the friction of moving goods. So they could send it seamlessly over the wire to their customers in the world. But in 5 years, if AI can take over a lot of the coding work and a lot of the GCC work, what happens?
Yes.
So we need to work on this on war footing. Otherwise, both on energy as well as on forex front, we can't remain so vulnerable and captive to the rest of the world.
Those are the macro areas. Now come to the domestic sector. What do you see needs reform there?
So domestically, of course, while a lot of things have happened, such as GST or RERA and so on, there have been good things which have happened.
There have been good things, yes.
But if you again step back and take the larger picture, we are in the middle of our demographic dividend, where the country is average 27 to 29 years old. And clearly there's a need for jobs.
And the aging has begun.
And aging has begun. And we will be 70, 80 million people coming into the job market every year. And yet when I talk to companies, they say these guys are not ready to come to the job. They don't have the skills.
Yes.
So what education we are giving and what skills we are giving. So while there's been a small start with an apprenticeship program and so on, what remains to be done is still very large, because at the heart of it, the Indian industrialist is not dying to take on big labor into his company because of the plethora of regulations.
And not only that, it interrupts the normal flow of work.
Right. So we are not geared to training people. We are not geared to putting on armies of people, and that low-tech manufacturing which gave rise to first the export economies of East Asia and then to China did not come here for these reasons, that people didn't want to put large manufacturing facilities and deal with really the plethora of regulations.
Correct.
Manish Sabharwal at TeamLease has published a fantastic chart which
on the compliances required.
On the compliances universe.
Frightening chart.
Yes. I often joke with my friends that if you're an industrialist, you should be given a Padma Shri, because you go out to battle each day with armor, not knowing from which side which bullet is going to come. And unless that regulatory complexity and then the judicial judgments, which I think there are 60 million cases or thereabouts stuck in the court, 6 million or more in the high courts. And if the justice takes 20, 30 years to come and everyone then tells you, why don't you settle on the side? An average businessman doesn't want to deal with this, because there's no return on your time invested. There's no value for your time invested over here. And while GST has speeded up velocity of the economy, in all other places you feel I can be stuck, I can be extorted, and there's a different traffic segment.
Yes.
So if we can use, I'm very hopeful with this advent of things like AI, like they did in the IT system, that you can have faceless assessments and the whole system works much faster. If that can happen across the value chain of commerce as well as law, because most judgments are, if you put the right facts in, you'll get the right judgment.
Absolutely.
You don't need human intervention in most of these. So maybe it takes 4-5 years, but unless we solve this velocity problem in India and stop these toll nakas which are along the way, I don't think we achieve our true potential. And we can keep hoping for people to, be given jobs, but that's not going to happen. So one end is this, which is the difficult administrative and judicial reform by use of technology. The other end is education and skilling, where, remember, the rise of China and Japan are examples in front of us.
You get
educational institutions.
Started with education.
You get skilling, you get industry, all aligned. And then you start investing in futuristic technologies, where again, if you remember, India missed the last industrial revolution, and we went through then 500 years of kind of slavery. Again, in this coming revolution of AI and biotech, if we miss it, we are going to remain effectively the processors for the rest of the world. Like Infosys or TCS are great Indian companies, but eventually they are writing code for the bulk of the money is being made by the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Googles who are giving them that business to do the low-tech stuff. And it's the same story which repeats in manufacturing as well.
Absolutely.
So to create that climate where we start creating our IP, our brands, our products, it needs a whole ecosystem. And while there are pinpricks of judicial and administrative lack of skilling, unless this all starts coming together and is part of a master plan, this is not going to happen very easily. So I really hope and pray that attention is given here. We focus a lot on the central government. The bulk of India is administered at the state and the city level. But the bulk of the resources, even when I now see centralization of taxes, the center collects the taxes and a third of it goes to the states. But it's the state which is building the local road.
So you need
the
to have
local
more
power.
allocation to the states.
So money needs to come back to states. But again, in that, it's a mystery to me that what happens to our tax collections, because I may be completely wrong here and out of line. But if our median GST rate is 16%, and it is pretty much charged on 75% of Indian GDP, the GST collection itself should be 12% of GDP. We are at 5%. So I can't imagine that there is more than 100% evasion. I mean, 12 ke samne you're collecting 5. Maybe my math is wrong by a few percentage points.
Correct.
But it's huge evasion going on in this country. And if you keep focusing on only the top, I think the top 0.3 or 0.4% of people are paying 80% of the taxes in India. It can't continue like that.
It can't. Yes.
And you'll start then losing people because of
we're already losing
taxation
people.
reasons.
We're already losing people.
So everyone wants to be here. Everyone wants to make this, it is the greatest country in the world with, like I said, abundance of resources. We are holding ourselves back with the regulatory chains we have bound ourselves in, and the lack of, kind of big picture thinking. And like I say, last mile detailing. You need both.
Yes.
You need to know the woods and the trees. And we seem to be like, even despite having seen examples of how other large countries have done it. So that's like, just an anguish cry of
yes.
of a patriotic guy.
In fact, there's a third area which I think you talked about earlier to me, and that is basically the policies themselves seem a little flawed. Instead of focusing on labor-intensive industries, we are focusing capital-intensive. Could you dwell on that a little bit?
Well, I mean, if you have more than 1 billion people, you clearly need to lift them out. And you can't go by this theory, like one famous RBI former governor says, we should go straight to high-tech manufacturing and services, which is like, hello.
It's a joke.
If the guy cannot, come and do a turner-fitter job, you're expecting him to, start writing software code. It doesn't happen. And see, in an army, you need generals, lieutenants, colonels, majors, soldiers, everything. So it's not this or that. To lift 1 billion people out, you have an example of China in front of you. You have an example of United States in front of you, where there are large populations. Everyone needs to get employed. If you keep trying to reserve things and save the small guy, for example, in agriculture, we'll try to save it for the small guy. But you know that agriculture cannot be remunerative. The world moved from agriculture to industry and then to services.
Correct.
And now it's going to the digital age. Agriculture has to do more value addition, so they need to have food processing. Food processing needs to then have branding, packaging, and then consumer marketing. Unless that entire chain starts getting built, by preserving it for the small guy, you're stopping the large guy from coming there. To build that whole chain. The crux of it is return on time invested. If that central message can go, if you have to do 2 national missions, one is per capita income is my goal.
Yes.
I need to get to $5,000 or $10,000. Second, return on time invested. Treat the citizen as an honest person, and the onus should be on the government to show that something else ought to be done. Currently, it's the other way. We are still running like the British government. Anyway, I can go on and on about what government needs to do. Let's turn the focus back on private sector as well. That historically, we've all been very happy to bring in technology from abroad.
Yes.
And make for them and export back to them. Or just take their license and distribute over here. I think that era is over and is behind us. We have reached a size of $4.5 trillion. If we want to get to number 3 in the world, like I said, we'll have to have our own IP, our own products, and our own brands. Indian industries expenditure on R&D as well as on marketing is abysmal. So it also then comes back to us as investors, that are we willing to play the longer game, where companies are investing and you may not see returns for a few years until it takes off. I think by now the Indian market has demonstrated that we are willing to support companies like that, provided we see capability and governance. The onus then also falls back on Indian industry. And we'll have to work a lot with the government to say, can you at least make these laws conducive so we can start taking a bet over here. We will make the change. We will be part of the army of people who will do it. So I am, as an investor, we're always optimistic and always hopeful. And what I call the inefficiency is the margin which you make. So the businessman and the investor always sees what the half glass empty or is it half glass full, and you proceed on that basis. Which is why this market has produced returns equivalent to US for 25 years. Because this inefficiency is there, people make money.
Yes.
But scale of money making can be completely different.
So we have to move now
from this trader and processor mindset to actual industrialist, product owner,
visionary
and IP owner. Absolutely.
Thanks, Manish. It's been a learning curve for me, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for calling.